Hello, I'm Alex Mansfield, the host of Manny Talks Shooting, and welcome to another episode. This is the shooting podcast where I talk to individuals all across the shooting industry. We'll talk competition, self-defense, concealed carry. If you like this content, check out our YouTube channel, Manny Talks Shooting. And without further ado, let's get to this episode. The title sponsor of Manny Talks Shooting is Go Fast Don't Suck. So if you need match banners for your match, check them out. They also have an awesome selection of pre-designed and customable jerseys. Don't forget, they are the home of the dry fire decals for your walls, so get those too. They've also got a plethora of patches and stickers that are hilarious and true. You know, Go Fast Don't Suck has a lot of things that you'll need on the range and off, so please check them out at gofastdon'tsuck.net. All right, there we go. Finally wanted to kick over. I usually don't try to jinx myself, so.
Yeah.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to another installment of the Manny Talks Shooting podcast, the podcast where you can enjoy it here, there, anywhere. You can enjoy it in town, out in the country, or in BFE where nobody lives, kind of like the guy I'm talking to tonight. We're sitting down with a man who likes to travel, the state of Michigan and into warmer places in the winter. We're sitting down with Trek of MDFI. How you doing, Trek?
I'm doing very good. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you for chit-chatting with me the other night. It seems it was about a couple weeks ago we were chit-chatting, and it's like after one podcast came out, and I was like, let's do a podcast. It makes everything easier, right? And, thumbs get tired. I mean, we might be doing this through the power of the internet, but we're going to have an organic, awesome conversation. So I appreciate your time tonight. And listeners, I think you'll enjoy this one. So Trek, as everybody, a lot of my listeners probably have no idea who you are because most of my listeners are competitive shooters.
Sure.
A lot of still a lot of defensive-minded guys like myself and out there listen. So they might not exactly know you by just your name. So who are you and how did you get into shooting?
As you mentioned in the opening intro, there's one person that lives in BFE, and that is me. That's why I don't have the video going on, so I apologize for that. But yeah, my name is Eric Utrecht. Everybody calls me Trek. I'm the owner of MDFI Training out of Michigan. I've been in the firearms training world for this is my 15th year on the firing line with MDFI. And unlike a lot of Americans, I joined the shooting world very late in life. I came from a family where I fell very far from the tree politically. Didn't really have many guns in the house. My dad had a 22. I think I was taken out to shoot it once. But I did join the U.S. Air Force after a very brief stint in the civilian college world. I went to Fair State University's graphic design program for a glorious year and a half where I dropped out. Just wasn't loving it. Didn't have a lot of discipline. Turns out you can skip as much college as you want. And ended up dropping out, going to work for Bronson Hospital in Kalamazoo, Michigan. I was part of the security team doing unarmed security, and I can tell you right now, it's not a very good issue. And my CPL was to, from, and during all work with Brinks Incorporated. So I did that and got my license to carry on my 21st birthday instead of being out drinking like everybody else, not shooting, doing shots. And I did that for a year. And sitting in an armored car all day, not getting paid very much, carrying a Smith & Wesson Model 10 with 18 rounds of 38 in a state where you could buy an AK for $80, driving $1 million around. One, it's not glamorous. Two, also not the best life choice as far as I was concerned. And I had a bunch of friends and mentors that were in the military and law enforcement. They said, hey, dum-dum, if you don't have any discipline, why don't you go and join the military? They're going to give you all the discipline that you want. So I ended up starting my military career in January of 2001. I became a military law enforcement officer. And then after getting back from my last deployment over to Iraq for Operation Iraqi Freedom, I had the opportunity to go to the NCO Academy after being an NCO in theater for a while. And after graduating from the NCO Academy, the commandant of the school asked me if I would be their next instructor. And so I went down to Maxwell Air Force Base in Alabama. And after 4 months of learning how to be a professional educator, I became a NCO instructor. And so as I left the Air Force, I had trained over 600 non-commissioned officers how to do their job. I got back to the state of Michigan, my home state, and had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and ended up working for Raven Concealment Systems out of Columbus with the holster business for Aries Gear in Ohio. But I joined as an unpaid assistant instructor to this company called MDFI. And in 2011, I started running the company, and I had the opportunity to buy the company in 2013. And so that's where my full-time job with MDFI started. And so I took what I had been trained as a professional educator and the things that I had learned about firearms, and then constantly as an educator, growing, learning, and adapting curriculum. And that's kind of where I stand today. So it's been a hell of a ride. Started, with 2 people at MDFI, and now we've got a cadre of 11. So it's really grown over all these years.
Yes, it has, and it seems like even from your short stint in the firearms industry, you've done a lot, right? Like your resume probably is packed more than a lot of people's in that short amount of time.
Sure.
But which is cool to see that you can take it from knowing nothing and then learning to be a teacher and then really dive deep into it, right? That's something cool that college isn't for everybody, right? Like I'm one of those people. College isn't for me.
Yeah, it was where I didn't have the discipline to, and frankly, had no life goals. My father was a retired graphic designer. I could doodle in high school. I figured, well, doodling equals graphic design. Turns out that couldn't be further from the truth. It is funny. My beautiful wife is an honor graduate from Ferris State's graphic design program that I dropped out of. Far more talented than a guy that can just doodle. But it was great. There's lots of things about my military career that I would say I didn't enjoy, but there's a lot of things I did enjoy. And one of the biggest things that made me the person that I am today, the discipline that I got from being in the military, and then of course, the professional education that I got to get me to this point was certainly well worth it.
Mm-hmm, absolutely, and that's true. But you do some pretty mean doodles. I remember back in the day,
yep.
When I long story. This is a long time ago, guys. Before I even started competing, I heard a Trek MDFI through like the let me look.
Yeah, Practically Tactical guys.
I gotta find their patch because their patch is on my wall behind me, in front of me. Yes, the Practically Tactical show. And then something about aliens and ashtrays. I remember.
Oh yeah.
Picture. I remember that picture specific. I don't know whatever happened to it because I knew I wouldn't have thrown it away, but I still have a picture of it. But it was Trek had he'll probably talk about it later a little bit too, maybe. But he had like a little, had like a merch shop that had cool stuff in it.
Made in Trexico.
Yep. And that was a cool thing, and I still have that banner. I mean, which is kind of cool. We talked about that the other week.
Yeah, every order got a hand-drawn doodle with it.
Yeah, and I had a really cool alien, and I'm kind of bummed out that I have no idea where that alien is. So, maybe if you're nice, if people run into you Trek, maybe you'll just scratch him a doodle. Oh, you never know.
I will definitely do that. Yeah, absolutely.
Come take a class, right? Exactly. Take a class. Come away with a doodle.
Yeah.
Bonus points. No, so that's cool. So you let her do all the graphic designing if you want, because you're teaching full time.
I've basically been told to stay away from MS Paint. If I try to do another MDFI advertisement with MS Paint, she'll probably divorce me or stab me in the leg or both. Yeah. She's very talented, so I just let her handle all the marketing for the company.
Hey, it makes it easy, right? You don't have to deal with it. You just ask, "Hey, can you please do this?" And it probably happens.
As long as I just start going towards the computer saying, "Never mind, I'll do it in MS Paint," and she'll drop whatever she's doing and start working on it.
Back in the early 2000s, MS Paint. Young people don't understand.
They just don't know. They just don't know.
Or when you had to make business cards and in Windows, that was horrible. There's so many bad things that you had to do back in the day. I remember growing up with a computer. Oh, God, it was the worst. I don't floppy disks. People nowadays don't understand floppy disks either, but
right. Oh yeah.
The power.
Yeah, we grew up with an Apple IIe in my household.
Oof. Ooh. At least you had an Apple. Yeah, you had an Apple. At least I had a clanged up Windows computer, but So to get back, so you've lived, in Michigan your whole life, other than your stint to Bama and overseas. What made you want to come back to this cold, unforsaken hatred of a place that we can use as a map on our hand?
Yeah. So what ended up happening was I got done with my tour. I had put in for a special duty assignment at the end of my. I had extended my tour as an enlisted NCO for the special duty of being an instructor. And I had put in for another special duty assignment. I had been given the green light. They said, we're going to have you re-enlist. You've been approved all the way up to the MAGCOM, which is just under the actual Secretary of the Air Force. And they got a new boss at the MAGCOM, and he's like, nope, I'm pulling Sergeant Utrecht's spot. We need the manning for law enforcement, so we're going to bring him back in the law enforcement world. That's not what I had put in for. And so I basically said, nope, you guys told me I was in, I'm out. And they said, well, we've heard that threat before. And so I walked into my chief's office and said, Chief, they pulled my special duty, I'm out. And he looks at me and he goes, oh my God, how much terminal leave do you have? And I said, I got 60 days, Chief. I'm out in 2 weeks. So I probably did one of the fastest out processing of the U.S. Air Force. I had all my stuff shoved into a storage locker in Rapid City, South Dakota. I took my beat up XJ Cherokee, left it all there, and drove back to Michigan, not knowing what I was going to do. And that's actually where going back to Michigan is where I met up with the then very disorganized yet still functional NDFI crew and became an unpaid assistant instructor. And that's what started me getting to know that world. And then here we sit to this day. So yeah, it was more of had no idea what I wanted to do. I ended up getting my PI license while I was back in Michigan. Started a private investigation section for a security company here in Michigan. Ended up going out on my own. I really enjoyed doing PI work in support of personal protection, and on the side, I was doing MDFI stuff. So yeah, did a lot. And as you mentioned, Raven Concealment, Aries Gear, got into the industry on top of the firearms training side. So yeah, it's been 15 years of definitely being in the industry, but also at the same time trying to be as far outside the industry as I can humanly be.
Right, be in your own little bubble, which is nice, right? You can control your income flow if you're in your own little bubble, right?
Right.
I mean, and that's the nice thing, right? You can control what you're doing. I mean, there's nothing I mean, you're traveling all over the state. It seems like you have the ranges that you hit from periodically for the most part, but you're always going somewhere. Even though you have a home base, like a home range, but it's not a firing range, correct? It's like a
Yeah, so we used to do a lot of travel. I would travel North Carolina, California, Arizona, Texas, New Mexico. And what we found is just luckily through word of mouth and success is that we just had someone from Nebraska come in, this last weekend. And so what people are coming up from all over the country to our classes. And of course, the majority are from Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. We do have our Northern Woods training facility, which is actually just in my quote unquote backyard. It's the 8 acres at the rear of our property, which is our live fire facility. We have the shoot neighborhood. We do NLTA force on force training. The Dark Angel medical guys come in. Arizona, Ed Calderon. If you haven't heard of him, Ed's Manifestos come in and done some counter custody and edged weapon stuff. But I did just sell Spectacle Lake Outdoor Club in Albion. I bought that a couple years ago. Tried to turn it into an MDFI only commercial range. Buying with the current economy, the luxury item was not a very good investment. So luckily, I was able to save what is owned by the alumni as shareholders. It's a conservation, not for profit, which is really awesome. And we actually just are now on a business range with range of Mount Pleasant. We do home range for live fire. But yeah, we do bounce Blue Water, Greenville, Flat River Conservation Club, Holland, Battle Creek, Spectacle Lake and Albion, and of course Mount Pleasant. And then we do some classes in the UP from time to time. But it's nice. Now I don't have to travel nearly as much because people are coming to us.
Right. That definitely does make it, a lot easier when you don't have to travel as much. I'm a little sad. Well, I'm not, I guess, a little sad. Right. So for your information, I live in Marshall, right? So right between Battle Creek and Albion, which is kind of nice. I've driven by.
Oh, yeah.
I driven by Spectacle Lake a couple times before it was before you even owned it. And I'm like, oh, look, I didn't know this was here because literally work 3 minutes. Like I could time it from when I leave my work to the range would have been like 3 minutes. And I'm like, that's kind of cool. But
oh, sure.
And it's really cool, right? Like they can.
Well, for those that are out there.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Spectacle Lake, even to this day, is even though I'm not owning it now, you buy a share, you become part owner of the club. It's a lifetime membership. And the biggest thing that set Spectacle Lake apart that I'm glad it carried over was this stuff where you can only fire this many rounds. You can't shoot on the move. No, our rule is if you're 4 rules compliant, if you are operating on those 4 rules of responsible firearms handling, you can do whatever you want to do. There's very few other quote unquote range rules. You can shoot 24 hours a day, night vision, white light. I mean, just go out there, be responsible, and have a good time. And there's only 200 shares. So once those are all sold, it's never going to be packed. It is your cool little slice of heaven. So if anybody's out there and they're interested, highly recommend looking into Spectacle Lake and Albion. It's been around since 1951. It's protected under the 1986 Range Protection Act. They can put a subdivision right next to it. They cannot shut it down, which is just awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which I'm really surprised because of all of the industrial behind it, but it is nice to be protected. It's a cool little property.
Yeah.
But yeah, people should look into it. I mean, it's not. I lost my train of thought, but it's okay because as long as I keep talking and there's no dead air, no one
no dead air. That's right, no dead air.
Like and that's one of my things, and I'll say that pretty much every show when I lose something, and then I can find a new a new avenue of going with it. But so Trek, you said when you joined MDFI, it was just 2 people, and now it's up to a cadre of 11. Mm-hmm. When you came on as an assistant instructor, were you pretty much still trying to absorb everything you could before you started teaching, or was it hit the ground running? Let's see what happens.
Oh no, absolutely. So there's a lot of work that has to be done to be a lead, and so it's not the firearms manipulation knowledge, the environment manipulation knowledge, the cover and movement, the low light techniques, the firearms manipulation techniques, the difference between a maybe competition technique or a defensive oriented technique. These are things that, of course, you need to be very, very proficient on. You need to be able to demonstrate them. You need to be able to know the whys so you can articulate the whys so it's not dogma. We're not just telling people, because that's in our classes, you won't hear war stories where we're just telling you about our military or law enforcement time. What you'll hear is usually the failures that we have seen where dogma has gotten in the way. But learning how to control a line. Now, going from a military where I was in charge of running either a formation or a classroom of 14 students or a team of 28 students together, there's a big difference between that and being on a live fire range. So yeah, there was a lot of things to absorb. But once again, you learn a lot of the failures. You see things that aren't being done right. I mean, one of the biggest things when I was part of MDFI, there was no formal curriculum, and I was a formally trained educator. And that is a very common thing in the firearms training industry. There's no formal curriculum. But people just know they have an outline. They've got a bunch of notes written down, and they know that this is what the students need to get, but they don't have a product that can be recreated as it needs to be over and over again to make sure that the students that take one class on one date leave there with the same skill set as a class that takes another date. So I learned a lot about what not to do. I learned a lot about what to do, made a lot of refinements. And when I bought the company in 2013, the first thing I did was I scorched earth the entire curriculum. I burned it all down to the ground. And because people out there are going to laugh, you've probably heard these names like we used to have, handgun 1, handgun 2, carbine 1, carbine 2. And then there's a shotgun 1, and there's no shotgun 2, because what are you supposed to do for a shotgun 2? Because, you don't have to aim shotguns as you hear out there, which is, of course, couldn't be further from the truth. The problem was with those organizations, not organizations other than MDFI, but when you organize a curriculum or a class structure like that has no curriculum, what ends up happening is student will come in, you've got instructor A that works at MDFI, and we know that in handgun 1, we need to get them through the 4 rules of responsible firearms handling, an efficient draw stroke that's safe and efficient. They need to go through ammo management and stoppage clearing, and that's what we need to get them through throughout the day. Well, the problem is, if you have no curriculum and instructor A gets 2 hours from the end of when they're all supposed to go home and the class has been rocking and rolling, and they're like, okay, well, we're done with what we know we needed to get to. And so the instructor's like, well, if we tell them they're done for the day, they paid for 2 more hours. So what are we going to do? And someone says, well, let's do some VTAC barricade. Let's do some cover. Well, let's do through the rules, standing, kneeling, moving around other people. Well, that's great. So we fill up the 2 hours with that. Then instructor B teaches handgun 1 a week later. They do the same thing, get through all the material that we know they need to get through. And when it comes down to that 2 hours and there's something left over, they're like, well, what are we going to do? And they say, let's do shooting on the move instruction. Well, cool. They start teaching how to shoot on the move and the difference between a scanning phase and an engagement phase. Well, when handgun 2 comes around and the instructor A now says, all right, we're going to go and says, we've already done it. The other half of the class says, we have no idea what you're talking about. Let's learn it. And so what you get is this problem with the foundation that one student has is solid. The other foundation is weak and full of sand. I think I heard you and Skylar talking about those damn ranges that have that soft sand. Well, the reason you don't like it, it's not a solid foundation for your footwork. Well, catastrophic events happen when you try to add a lot of weight, like low light training or moving around other people dynamically with guns when someone doesn't know the 4 rules. They don't know good trigger finger and safety manipulation discipline. They don't know definitively up, definitively down, or the other directions that a firearm can be responsibly pointed. And that's it. So we made sure that when we scorched earth the program, I rewrote everything to even include our most popular class, handgun class, which is called You Suck, It's Not the Gun. We kept the name because it's an awesome name. People love the name. It draws a lot of people to class. But all that class used to be was a bunch of notes and drills. There was no structure. And what I did was rebuilt the entire thing with a core foundation and an advanced and specialty tier. And we're the only school that I'm aware of in the country where you cannot anymore jump into an advanced class. You must go through the stepping stones. And of all the people that have said, well, I feel like I'm going back if I take this lower level class, and I've told countless people from around the country, if you come to a class that you think you are above and you didn't get anything out of it, I will pay for your advanced level tuition. I have never had a student say that I didn't learn something and I'd like my money back, which tells me that we're doing it right. So yeah, we're a very different structure than any other school that I've ever seen. And that's what I love about, I am a firearms instructor, but I'm a professional educator first. And I was on a podcast about a year ago, and they said, Trek, it's very interesting to hear, you're a nationally known school, you're a nationally known instructor, but you were just an Air Force cop. And that's weird. And I said, you're absolutely right. But it's not that I'm an Air Force cop that makes me a successful instructor. I'm a professional educator. I just happen to be a firearms instructor as well. And so, of course, as a firearms instructor, I have to be good. And I think I'm very good. I know that my cadre, these young Thundercats, are far better. They're making me a better shooter. What I'm trying to do is make them a better instructor than I am, a better educator. And so we have a symbiotic relationship where they're making me a better shooter and I am making them better educators. And I demand of them that, of course, you have to be very proficient in your shooting, but you've got to be the world's best educator, because we're not going to waste our clients' hard-earned time and money. And we totally understand, just like when you guys shoot competition, when that buzzer goes off, all the coaching you might have had and all the powwows you might have had, Jake Wedge, I know you guys were talking about Jake. Jake's awesome. Mm-hmm. So those learning sessions you have with Jake, the moment the buzzer goes off, Jake ain't there. It's you and your gun and your short shorts and your awesome sunglasses. In a self-defense situation, the MDFI cadre, although we are available for an hourly rate to be there with you in a gunfight, chances are we're not going to be there to back you up. So we need to give you all those skills so not only you can learn them, but you can teach them to other people in your family and make you yourself and your community responsibly armed. And so we take it very seriously.
Mm-hmm. Well, and as you mentioned it, you're a professional educator, and that's where you're coming from this first. A lot of people it's like the thing, right? The School of Rock quotes, right? For those who can't do, teach. Those who can't teach Jim.
Teach
right?
Jim, yep.
Right. Not every good shooter can coach or teach, right? It takes, just because I can fundamentally do a skill very well doesn't mean that I have the ability to articulate that to person B as effectively as someone who has good educational standards, right? And
no, absolutely.
A lot of people miss that too, right? Just because your buddy is like the best shooter, I'll beat up on Skylar, right? Because we both know Skylar. So Skylar may be able to do it really well, but he might not be able to tell me really well how he does it or what he's thinking about it when he does this. And it doesn't correlate to me because it just doesn't work for me. But and that's where a lot of people don't realize that not everybody can teach.
Well, yeah, and I'll throw this out there because you did pick up on you picked on Skylar, but you actually picked the worst example because I'll throw this out there on your podcast. Skylar, I know you're probably going to listen to this at some point in time. That dude's busier than sin with everything he's doing and rocking and rolling and kicking ass in his short shorts. That dude ever wants a job with MDFI, he's got one. His interview has been done with all the years that I've spent with him now because he's a professional educator. And I know that his skills in the gym could be easily translated to what he's learned, right? And so I'll give you two great examples of what you talked about. The first one is there was a Grandmaster class shooter out there. This was many years ago. Who was on Facebook back when I made the mistake of being on Facebook. And there was someone that he was doing like an open question and answer session, and people could ask me questions. And someone was like, "Hey man, you're awesome. You can shoot really well. Man, I'm having a real hard time with my trigger pull, man. How do you pull it?" And the guy's like, "Straight back to the rear, bro. Straight back to the rear." And my response was, "You can't do that." And if you actually look at trying to pull a trigger finger straight back to the rear, unless you're doing a whole arm action, that physically can't take place. And I got dogpiled on by the public, and they were like, he's a Grandmaster class shooter. And I said, yes, and he's not a very good educator. And what he should be saying is he has learned through grip, stance, posture, presentation, most probably good grip technique, that he can isolate his trigger finger from all other 9 fingers and his hands, and he is pulling the trigger back as straight to the rear as he can humanly do, and use other techniques to stop that trigger finger from overpowering the 9 other fingers, and of course, then that translates to muzzle orientation. And so that's a big thing, right? You're absolutely right. Just because you can shoot doesn't mean that you And the other thing that I take from Will Petty at Centrifuge Training, that he's the guy that created the VCQB, or Vehicle Close Quarter Battle Program, that's been adopted by the FBI and many other agencies like Michigan State Police. And I love the quote, and the quote is, bona fides does not equal relevance. Bona fide is not equal relevance. And it's very important why I tell my instructors they must be educators first, is that we are teaching mainly civilians who care about defending life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, and of course their families, loved ones, and innocent life. My military background is not very relevant to most of my students. My guys that are Leos, I've got a deputy chief for a small department here in Michigan. His time that the warrant service that he does almost every day is not relevant to most people. Failures that we see might be, there's some small lessons from those that might be, but we have to work very, very carefully to make sure that we are teaching things that are relevant to our students. There are lots of guys that I'm friends with that have the sleeve tattoos. They've been there, done that. They were part of special operations in some way, shape, or form. Well, constitutional use of force that exists in the United States, specifically Michigan and Michigan's Supreme Court case law, is completely different than rules of engagement in a theater of war. I mean, I've heard of schools that are here stateside that have special operators, and they're teaching what's called a dead check, which is, I shot this dude because he was a lethal threat, and as I walk by him, I put 2 more rounds into him when he's face down there with a big pool of blood. Well, constitutionally, that threat is no longer there. You've just executed a potential non-threat anymore. And so the problem is there are rules of engagement overseas, or there have been rules of engagement overseas, where every military age male you put a couple rounds into because they've played dead and they've wiped out entire squads of American Marines, soldiers, and airmen. So I get it. But that's another one, too. You have to make sure that regardless of what you do, that you're very relevant to the people that are there. And it would be the same as me trying to teach a defensive-oriented class to, 3-gun shooters. Well, I've got to be very careful because there's techniques with especially the shotgun, the inverted quad load, which is awesome to watch a competitive shotgunner load. You're giving up a master firing grip. So I generally talk about it, unless you can do that faster than a grandmaster, try not to give up your master firing grip, because for the most part, you're going to be doing single loads and the fumble factor becomes real. And you have to balance yes, a competitive shooter can do a quad load very fast, but if you're not that person, what can you do under stress? And so if I was teaching 3-gunners, well, keeping a master firing grip, that IPSC target ain't going to kill you. So maybe let's give up a master firing grip for some speed. And we find that balance, what we call gas versus brakes, which is why a professional race car driver doesn't go around the track yelling America, just slamming the gas down. If you ever get a chance to watch their feet on camera, it's an incredible balance of clutch, brake, and gas. And it's a symphony because they get it, right? And so we have to find that as educators, we got to make sure that we're doing that symphony with our teaching style and the material that we're getting out to people.
Mm-hmm. Right. And it is, and like you mentioned, your audience, right? What you're teaching to that audience right now. Now, do I recommend, I'll say this on air. I recommend any of my competition shooting friends or people out there take a class or go seek some instruction, some knowledge from some other camp, right? If it's defensive minded, we'll say, I don't know, tactics or whatever. Take something that's outside of our wheelhouse and go get some education, right? So, because there's a lot of different things to learn in different applications, right? Like there's things that I would do in competition 100% of the time. Absolutely. But when it comes to defensive encounter, absolutely not, right? There's so many other, principles of shooting that are still applied, but doing certain things I would do in a competition would not be what I would do on the street defending my life or my loved ones. Because
no, you bring up a great point. Tim Nelson, one of my lead instructors, he said this. I'm going to eventually take it and claim it as my own. But he talks about, in his opening briefing, and we've had lots of people cross over from the competition world to our defensive classes, and it's awesome. And some show up with the carry gun, some show up with a race rig, and you can absolutely translate the stuff that we're doing because we're all about efficiency. And Tim talks about, how do you win a shooting competition? Fast and accurate. And you hear those people say, well, competition will get you killed in the streets, and nobody wants to get killed in the streets. But how do you win a gunfight? You're fast and accurate. So generally the people that say competition will get you killed in the streets means that they suck at competition, and they don't want to show their butt, because someone like you and Skylar and all the other guys that are out there really dedicated to competition, that in a gunfight there's not going to be that square box. And you can have your toe over that line. It's not going to be the end of the world. But you also understand that toe over the line, if it's cover, you could be overexposing yourself, and that could be very bad. And so it's those critical thinkers that can say, I am in the game right now. And the game is a shooting game. and I'm going to use this fast and accurate. I'm going to win the game. And oh, by the way, now I'm walking a movie with my significant other, and somebody just came up and went lethal. I'm in a completely different type of game, and I got to remember what skills translate, what skills do not. And I'll give you a great example of. I won't call the individual out, of course, because we all learn, and this was a great learning moment for this individual. We had a squad leader for competition. It was his first formal defensive class, but he was a veteran 3-gun shooter, and he was there with a bunch of friends. He was the squad leader, and he went through opening briefing, and we talk about the 4 rules. It's a very, very in-depth briefing. We give lots of examples, and after this very, very in-depth briefing, he went over to the berm. We say, we run a hot range, guys. If there's not any questions, go kit up. Go ahead, load and make ready in the safest direction possible based on situation and environment. He loaded his gun, fired around right between his feet, right down on the ground at the berm. Bam. And that was it. Luckily, rule number 3 violation. No other rules were violated. Nobody got hurt. And so, of course, we had him holster up. We had him clear out. And he was removed from the class because it was a negligent discharge. But I did talk to him. I always do a debrief, and it's not a yelling, screaming thing. It's I want to try to find out what happened because we had just talked about it, and it was very interesting. And the breakdown was he's never taken a defensive class where they told him it's a hot range before. And you go to what happens every time he goes back to the holster in competition. It's unload, show clear, pull the trigger, hammer down, boom. And what his brain did is what we call instincting. He was so locked in, couldn't separate through critical thought, that he was not in the 3-gun match. He was in a defensive class where we had just given him carte blanche to be responsible. And he put a round in the chamber. And instead of just going back to the holster finger off the trigger, his brain was like, hey, every time you do this in the competition, you pull the trigger. It was a millisecond of failure. And he did it. And so we talk about that now. You can shoot competition. You can be a great defensive shooter. And I would argue that both of them are very complementary as long as we are critical thinkers with it. And so we talk about there are 2, when you get to firearms manipulation, there's 2 categories. One is instinctual, and that is ammo management and stoppage clearing. When something happens to that gun, you fix it instinctually. At the same time, muzzle orientation and trigger finger and safety discipline is never instinctual. It is always critical thinking. And so we have to get to a point where we are, it's cliche, but I still use it, one with the gun. It is an extension of my body. I can instinctually fix it when it's down, but I have to be able to say, no, they didn't tell me hammer down, which is not really necessary to show the gun's clear. But I know I'm not going to argue. It's part of all of these competitions. So I have to say, the RSO just told me, yeah, the end issue was this individual was, he ND'd because he was instincting on trigger pull versus critical thinking versus taking somebody that's on my line that shows up to a defensive handgun oriented class like our foundation handgun and saying, hey, I'm here to learn how to be a defensive mindset shooter. Cool. Well, knowing the audience is very important. I can work with them. They could be standing next to a 3-gun shooter who says, I've heard good things about the class and the feedback that you guys give. I'm here to really focus more on my efficiency because I'd like to be a better competition shooter. My cadre and I, we can have those people standing shoulder to shoulder on the line, and we can work with them on those 2 categories. What's instinctual? Well, ammo management and stoppage clearance is just as important for a competition shooter as it is for a defensive shooter. And at the same time, I can be working those critical thought, trigger finger manipulation, safety manipulation, and muzzle orientation are once again just as important in real life, because it is real life in a competition and real life in the street. If you have to do a self-defense shooting, they all are very, very applicable. We just need to be critical thinkers behind the gun. And of all the things I think MDFI does, we build critical thinkers first. The rest of all the firearm skills is kind of a secondary thing.
Right. Well, absolutely. And as you mentioned it, as you mentioned it earlier, you can't skip past a foundational level class, which I think is a smart avenue. One, you could potentially, you're always going to have a repeat customer because they want to get to that top level class, but they got to get there first.
Sure.
Which is a great marketing system, by the way. But it's also, it makes sure that they're ready for that, right? You can't just skip and not know, because somebody, someone can always pat their resume and be like, well, I've taken a class with this guy, and this guy, so I don't need all of your classes. But the nice thing is when you teach them in foundation handgun or you suck, it's not the gun as their first class, you really get to see who they truly are, and then you can gauge from there. And as you mentioned, you can have a critically minded thinker, a self-defender next to a competition shooter on the line, and everyone's going to get better. right? Because they're going to watch the guy next to them and they're going to drive to be better and push themselves. I mean, you do mention on all of your class listings, it's an ego-free zone, which is very hard with a lot of type A personality men on the firing line. But
100%. Yeah.
But so have you had to remove anyone from a class because they weren't ego-free?
No, not. I've never had to remove students for that. We have the highest, and I'll say this with is a friendly competition to any other defensive school out there. Frankly, any shooting school. We have the highest control standards of any school in the world. I guarantee in the country of the United States of America. You come to our class, we do not allow grown adults to be children with firearms. But with that being said, when I tell someone that's a beginner, we say a beginner is not a child. A beginner is an adult who wants to learn. There will be no children in my class with a firearm, but you can absolutely be an adult who's a beginner. So the only way that I can do that, because I know that somebody in the class can be an advanced shooter, and they might be taking a refresher. And I'll just go a bit of a tangent. Yeah, so we used to accept outside resumes, and there was some big names on there. People were like, I've taken this and that, and I've run around cars and shot it. And what we were finding is we were either A, booting these people for safety violations, or B, we were having to watch them like hawks and give them feedback because they couldn't accomplish tasks that were done in our foundation level. And so not only is that a detriment to the flow of the class, it's a detriment when the instructors they have to focus on one person for everything and can't give feedback to the rest. And we do try to keep a very high instructor-student ratio. The students don't know it, but they're losing out on why they're there. And so what I like about our tiered structure is now you're getting everything that you need. You're not having to worry about learning foundation. For example, we teach stoppage clearance in daylight and foundation handgun. When you come to low light long gun or handgun, you're doing stoppage clearance exercises in total darkness. If you can't do that in the daylight, you're going to ride the struggle bus and it's going to be a train wreck. But if you know the method we teach you in daylight, you're going to be just fine and good to go, right? So that's a big one. But to get to your question about the ego-free zone, I've never had to kick somebody out for saying, for doing anything that violates ego, because when you have a team of 24 people plus cadre, they wouldn't put up with it anyway, because I make it very, very clear that fear factor rules. If you guys remember that old show, you'd have the guy that was the big talker, and you would have the quiet guy or gal, and the big talker might be beating him by a second or two in the physical fitness competition. But the moment it came time to eat cockroaches, the big muscly guy is crying in the corner because he can't eat the cockroaches, and the quiet person's just eating those cockroaches like nobody's business, and then ends up coming out on top. There's always somebody better than me. There's always somebody, and all we're doing by training is trying to make it where we're minimizing the amount of people that are better than us. Of course, in competition, whether that's a competition, shooting competition, or a life or death competition, right? So I've never had that. We do kick out quite a few students that violate the 4 rules of responsible firearms handling. The majority of them are muzzle violations. The second most are negligent discharges, and those are very few and far between. But rule number 2 violations are the most prevalent. In fact, this year alone, we have removed 8 students out of hundreds, but 8 students total, and all of them have been for rule number 2 violations. So when does it? What happens when somebody gets kicked out for rule number 2 violation? Well, this is actually great, because I'll share with you, because this directly translates, and I'm sure you have probably seen people DQ'd in competition for rule number 2. I'm sure it happens all the time. So we had 2 weekends a couple years ago. I had one that I called The Happening. And if you haven't seen the movie by M. Night Shyamalan Ding Dong, the movie's called The Happening. All these people try to kill themselves and successfully do so. And I had a weekend where I felt like I was living the movie, and I had to stop grown adults that I thought were just trying to kill themselves with guns after going through an hour-and-a-half briefing that covers everything about being responsibly armed. Are there any questions? We show examples. Well, my other lead instructor, Tim Nelson, he had a weekend that I won't say the name, but he upped the name, and the effing is what he called his weekend. And so he was burnt out. He could not believe, after, you remove somebody the very next day, we have a different class. We talk about what happened the next day, the day before. We go through it in depth so we can have a very, very controlled day, and somebody does something again. And so it was very interesting. We track a lot of data. We track student removals. We track what happened, what led up to it, the reactions of the students when it happened, and all sorts of other data with the company. And we have done so for a couple of years. And what we found out, and this is very interesting, and I hope the listeners really find this good to know, is that we found two very distinct 100% things when it came to rule number 2 violations. And the first one is that we've never removed anybody for an intentional muzzle violation. And it seems funny when I say that, an intentional muzzle violation. Like, hey, Trek, you're pointing a gun at me. And I'm like, yeah, I know, man. Well, that's a self-defense situation. If I'm pointing a gun at you and you say, dude, you're pointing a gun at me, and I'm like, yep, and you move left and I track you left, and you move right and I track you right, you should probably draw your gun and fill me in, because ability, opportunity, and now intent or jeopardy has been presented, right? And that's what a reasonable, prudent person would have done if placed in my shoes, knowing what I knew at the time, with a reasonable person standard. So that means that everyone, and I guarantee you it's the same with your competition, that means it's been unintentional or negligent every single time. So I tell the students, understand that you'll never try to do it intentionally. You're not going to want to do it, but you will do it nonetheless. So hold on to point 1. Point 2, very, very interesting. We have never removed a student for a muzzle violation when the task given to them is shooting. When they are supposed to shoot, they've never muzzled another person. And why? Because they know they're about to shoot. And of course, what comes out of the barrel of a gun? Bullets. So what that means is everybody is removed during an administrative task other than shooting. That's loading, unloading, stoppage clearing, movement, making ready, uncasing a gun behind the line, whatever it is. That's when people think, well, I'm not shooting, so I don't need to worry about it, right? And so how we teach that is, and this applies in competition, even when you have the rules about muzzle orientation, the 180 rule, et cetera, is we have to get away from the whole keep your gun pointed to the berm at all times. We have to get rid of that, because that is not realistic in any way, shape, or form. Now, we know the safest direction most of the time, especially during fire, will be into the berm, but I go grocery shopping a lot, and I've never seen a berm at Meijer. Never seen one at Kroger, never seen one at Piggly Wiggly, wherever I've been. So what we say is you're going to orient your muzzle in the safest direction based on situation and environment. Situation and environment. So if I am standing on the make ready line and my RSO is there and he just got his brand new shot timer and he's really excited to use it, and he's like, all right, this course of fire starts at a compressed ready position, so go ahead, come to a compressed ready or low ready position. Cool. So I'm into the berm or at a 45-degree angle off my feet, and the RSO, before he hits the buzzer, he fumbles the shot timer and it goes right in front of me, and without thinking, he dives in front of where my gun is at. Well, if I go by keep your gun pointed at the berm at all times, my gun's not going to move, and he's going to muzzle himself with my gun, versus a critical thinker is going to go immediately muzzle straight into the sky. Now, granted, another RSO could be like, disqualified. Now, I could fight that one all day long, but I would rather take the DQ than possibly porting the RSO's brain, because he lost control. I didn't lose control, but I stayed in control, and I got that gun far away from him. Now, of course, I'm not pulling the trigger in the sky, but even if I were to loose that round into the sky, that's a hell of a lot safer than down into his brain. And so that's the first rule is gun, you can only decide that. The RSO can't decide it. The match director can't decide it. You're going to orient that gun in the safest direction. Now, of course, a match director's job is to make sure that when shooting, like just a great example, there are targets you got to be careful, because if they take a kneeling position and go for a brain box shot, they could clear a berm. And that's what a match director does, is they go through and they make sure that all the angles of all the places, and they even go, what if somebody messes up? Let's take a knee here, even though they're not supposed to shoot. Oh, no. That shot right there, we're going to go ahead and block out that brain box shot, and we're going to make it a no-shoot area, because if they shoot for that, it would clear that short berm at whatever range that you're using. And so the other part, which is very critical, is what we call task versus priority. And the same thing applies to any time we've got a gun. When I've got a gun, the muzzle's always priority, period, dot, the end. Always a priority, period, dot, the end. Everything else is a task. Everything else. So brass down my shirt, getting burned is the task. Muzzle is my priority. RSO dives in front of my gun. Task is standing on the line. muzzle, get that thing high and away from his head. When I am moving, muzzle is priority to make sure I don't muzzle myself or other people. The movement is the task, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what we generally find is it's when people put the task over the muzzle that catastrophes nearly occur. And that is the beauty of the 4 rules, is that if you violate rule 2, but not 1, 3, or 4, ain't nobody going to die. Nobody's going to get hurt. You'll just piss people off and you'll get DQ'd. It's when 2 or more of those rules are put together that we hear these horror stories about, tourniquets on legs and shooting competitions and things like that. So, and I'll give a great shout out. There was a match that I saw. Some RSO was downrange taping targets, and somebody started the shooter. And it was beautiful because this shooter's rocking and rolling in short shorts and Solomons. And he comes around that barricade, and that RSO is taping. And immediately he goes muzzle up and looks at the other RO like, what in the hell? That is that critical thinker. That's that person that, you've been procedural or DQ, you went muzzle high. It's like, I don't want to kill this dude that's right in front of me. And I love seeing bad situations that don't go bad because the person there is horrible. But I think you'd agree with me. We see so many failures to the point that my instructors now have a joke. They'll send me a video, and I just got a horrible one of a quote unquote firearms training class, which is the fact that nobody is dying is amazing. And I just respond with grunt. And they know that that's the joke, is me just taking a low, deep sigh, because we see it so much that it really starts to hurt your soul, because there is a big difference between a gun owner and a responsibly armed citizen. And we have far more gun owners than we do responsibly armed citizens.
Mm-hmm. And that is like the scary part when you think about it. Someone who loves the Second Amendment and enjoying their shooting hobbies, you don't know who you can essentially, when you show. And not that I judge new people who come to a match. I always ask, what is your legitimate experience like shooting these firearms? Like, have you taken like I always say tactical or defensive minded class? Have you taken one of those? And like, okay, I'm brought down about 50% here. I at least know that you're not gonna try to point the gun at me, and you're gonna keep your finger out of the trigger unless you're ready to fire this gun. So it puts me at ease a little bit. And then they're always gonna forget something. New people always forget something on a course, and then they have to do something weird. But that's where I got to pay more attention. I've got to be more observant, and I've got to make sure I'm doing the right thing to make sure that they stay safe as well. Which is
yeah.
nice. Go ahead.
No, so I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. You just said it's the beauty of the thing. First of all, kudos to RSOs. Kudos to those that do the RSO job. It is a thankless job for the most part. You have to shoot early. You got to set things up. You're exhausted. But there are people at RSO, and they do it for any perks that you might get. And you just hit the nail on the head like an educator. If someone is like Skylar, you're just ROing. You're watching for procedurals. You're watching for foot placement. You don't need to worry about the Skylars of the world muzzling you with a gun. Of course, that's your job. You got to do it. But when you have that new shooter and you get that information, you now have to be more locked in. And there are people out there, just like defensive firearms instructors, that don't understand that you have to shift gears when there's a new shooter. You've got to give them more eyeball time because they don't know what they don't know, that cognitive dissonance, if you will. And you led me to the one thing I was missing from the ego-free zone. If you tell people that are beginner competition shooters and you tell people that are beginner defensive shooters of the first class, well, we don't accept children here, but you can be a beginner as an adult. The way the secret to life is what we call the speed of control. It's not fast. It's not slow. People can go very fast and they can mess up. People can go very slow and mess up. People can go very slow and be awesome. They can be professionals with guns. And so we call it the speed of control, meaning you go, even in a defensive class where you're trying to get a fast draw stroke, you go at the speed in which you do not overrun your control headlights, and you will get nothing but high fives from us. Because as you get more proficient, you can start adding gas. And as you go around the corner, if you start to feel the tires slip, you back off, get a little bit more on the brakes. And you do that, and you do that, and you do that. And you keep pushing, and you get better. But right off the bat, don't try to be Ricky Bobby. Don't try to be Ricky Bobby, because that's when bad things happen. So if you let people know, especially in competition or defensive training, hey, I'm your RSO. I'm going to give you a high five if you do this technically correct. Ace every target. Don't get a target point. Try that out your first time, and then start to add that gas. And if you can do that and say, there's no shame, no one on your squad is going to make fun of you. They're going to give you a high five. But if you ND into your leg, that's going to be a really bad day. So just, focus on what's important. That's having fun and staying in control. And that's how we do it. And what we tell people is, if you ever feel like you're going to lose control, no matter what I were to ever say, if I became evil and demand that you shoot, if you do not feel comfortable shooting, you turn around and tell me to F off, because you are in control of that gun. I cannot tell you to do anything with that gun. You are in charge, speed of control, and you're going to be just fine. And that, we've had a lot of people that on a really hot, exhausting day, they holster up and we're like, hey, you okay? And they're like, if I keep shooting, I'm going to do something that could hurt me or somebody else. Those people always get a high five, and I always make it right. Like, hey, you can come back to this class on me because you are a grown adult and you just were a team player. Versus I've had kick people out, and after they get kicked out, they're like, yeah, for like the past 2 hours, I've just been losing it. I'm like, hey, grown adult. Hey, grown adult. Remember what we talked about? That's how you kill people. That's not the ego-free zone. That is overriding. So yeah, I guess in a sense, it's not people have an ego where they're talking smack to people, but I have removed people that couldn't do an ego check and say, I'm not Superman, and they allow themselves to become a liability. So to answer your question, yeah, I have kicked people out for an ego-free violation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for watching another episode of Manny Talks Shooting. I greatly appreciate it. And if you could do me a favor, please go patronize our sponsors here when you are available. We've got Hunters HD Gold, Go Fast Don't Suck, Outdoor Dynamics, Make Stuff Better, Range Panda, Southern Barbecue, Laugh and Load, Summit City Bullets, 2 Alpha Apparel, and Tom Castro Shoot Academy. Now let's get back to this episode.
Right. And well, back dabble a little bit to how you were talking a little bit about, tourniquets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you never want to have to put a tourniquet on somebody at a match, right? And I know that. I've had a friend a couple years ago. This person had a negligent discharge through their knee. One, it showed that the range was hella not prepared for having. There was no trauma kits, nothing anywhere like for 100 yards, right? So it was either someone's car or the clubhouse. So once I heard that story, I was very adamant about having a med kit always on my fancy competition cart now. I have a Dark Angel kit that's always strapped, it's big red, and I'm like, pull the cord, grab what's inside of it. Like, you're gonna rip this thing off my cart, I don't care. We're gonna save somebody's life if we need to. Luckily, never needed it, but I always tell everybody the first stage of the day, if something goes wrong, find my cart. It's right here. It's a freaking flaming color, but you'll find it, and it's got the med kit on it. So, and it's not inside anything. That's one thing that drives me nuts is people put the med kit on the inside, and I'm like, I'm digging through a bunch of crap, and you can't find anything. But no, and that.
No,
go ahead.
No, it's great to hear. I've heard lots of horror stories. There's been a couple NDs with injuries in Michigan in the past couple of years. I was very proud that I believe 2 of them were saved by MDFI alumni that had their Dark Angel med kits and Dark Angel training, which made me very, very proud. Dark Angel Medical is our not only lifelong friends, but they are one of our training affiliates, and we bring them in every year. We're the only Michigan host for them. And frankly, RSOs should. There's great belts. I know they're a pain in the butt sometimes to keep them on your belt when you're running behind a shooter, but I use a Wilder tactical $10 adapter that clamps onto my belt when I'm on the line. All my cadre, we have Dark Angel kits on the small of our back until there's a teaching point where I cannot wear it because it would interfere if I'm rolling around in supine. We will then announce where the medical kit is. But that's great. That's what needs to happen. It's just like part of the job. It's ear pro, eye pro, med kit. I know for you guys competition shooters, I would not want to wear my Dark Angel kit on the small of my back, trying to be as fast as possible, running around. You can snag it, and it's just weight wobbling around. But having one on your cart, like you said, is beautiful. And frankly, it would do nothing other than bolster the medical briefing that should be happening at the beginning of every course to have an RSO, all RSOs wearing a med kit and also knowing that they are a graduate of some sort of training. And that speaks volumes then to the seriousness that organization takes. And when you hear those stories where it's like no one's got a med kit or someone's got like a belt and that's all they've got, that's a bad day. It's 2024. At a certain point in time, we have to say, come on, guys, let's get into this century and start to take it seriously. So kudos to you and those that are doing it.
Right. Well, and I'll not try to pat myself on the back, but a couple years ago, I've worked at this facility for a while now, but we had first responders, right? The Red Cross will do their first responder CPR class, but I'm also like we have machinery in this building that literally could be life ending and life altering. I'm like, let's get a little bit better training. Let's get some tourniquets or, some proper medical equipment to, like, if somebody had a mangled arm, we could actually save their life instead of just waiting for paramedics, which are 10 to 15 minutes away. I'm like, let's take this. Let's get a little bit serious. So then I made sure that all of our first responders were equipped with proper kits. Now
That's awesome.
They weren't Dark Angel kits per se, but they were definitely, North American Rescue, good quality vetted kits. And they got a couple of people asked, like, why'd you, like, because they got the kits before we took the training, and I'm like, you'll figure it out in a minute, like in a while. Like as soon as we take this course, you'll understand why you have this, and it's not a boo-boo first aid kit. I mean, you can throw some Band-Aids in there to save somebody, but we also have Band-Aid box, the big Cintas cases of Band-Aids. But
yeah, Dark Angel would be the first one to say, even if it's not their kit, good on you. Good on you for having medical trauma. There's boo-boo kits versus trauma kits. There's a time and a place for both, and you certainly don't want to have a boo-boo kit when you've got a case of trauma. I unfortunately, in my career in 15 years, knocking on wood right now, I've had to directly patch up one student that decided to port his leg, holstering up his handgun, and we as a MDFI team, we've had to also fix a non-attendee that was at a range near our class that ported his support hand. He had a support hand in front of the muzzle trying to clear a stoppage, and he was in an adjacent bay. He was by himself, no cell phone, no med kit, no medical training. I was running the line in the last half an hour of class. Someone yelled at me. I turned around, and there was a member, and I was in the middle of running students, so I basically waved him and said, I'll be with you in a second. And then he yelled at me again, and before I got mad, I realized he had a red towel wrapped around his hand, and it was actually a white towel that was soaked through with blood. So a ceasefire command was given. Our medical plan that we do at the beginning of every day went into place, and we got that guy taken care of. We were actually very lucky. We had 2 medical professionals in class, so the cadre assisted them as secondary, and we got him medical attention, got him out of there. And if he had passed out, it probably would have been a life-ending event. So it was very good that we were able to get him care. And now that range loves us, which is awesome. Sadly, that's what had to happen for that, but it's nice that they know our name is synonymous with being prepared. So yeah, it can happen in a split second. And I like the quote from, and I cannot think of his name, but the lead cave diver from the 13 Lives Cave Rescue in Thailand. One of the best quotes I've ever heard in my life, and I use all the time. He says, just because something is known as being dangerous does not mean that we do it in a dangerous manner. And it is one of the greatest quotes, especially if we're going to go out and play with guns. Guns are deadly. They are not safe, but we can make them as safe as humanly possible. And we can do that through learning those 4 rules, making them part of our life, and also being prepared for when there's a failure. So yeah, good on you and anyone like you that's doing it.
Mm-hmm. So I want to switch gears just a little bit. So
Sure.
I want to talk a little bit about not your curriculum, but your courses, right?
Sure.
So, if anyone go to trainmdfi.com/courses, and you're going to see all of Trek and his company's courses. I'm assuming You Suck It's Not the Gun is probably your most attended class, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
It is. Yeah, it is.
So now, how many students take You Suck It's Not, if you can guess, or on average on data, how many students take You Suck It's Not the Gun in a single year in 2023?
Oh, geez. We're generally between 1,000 to 1,500 students a year. I would say easily 350 to 400. It's a lot. We have quite a few that attend that class. It is our most popular class. The name definitely helps. When I bought the company, like I said, that was not the class that it is today. I have completely burnt down, revamped, and authored the 18 pages of curriculum and 100 rounds fired. So you come to a class, it's only 100 rounds in 8 hours. It's 100 single shot exercises. And we generally get 2 reactions to that class. People are like, oh, I love the name. I want to take the class. They've heard good things about it. And that's called marketing. So much that we trademarked it, put it on a T-shirt. And the other one is people get offended when they hear the name of the class. And it's very rare, but I do get maybe monthly. I'll get somebody that's usually from a church group, and they've heard good things about the class, and they want to take it to the board of directors or the pastor or the deacon and say, hey, can we take our security team through this class? Because we've heard nothing but great things, but they're worried that the name might be received poorly. And every time they ask me to change the name, I always tell them no. And I give them a very polite response. And the reason is I tell them, you haven't taken the class yet. And I say, if you come take the class and you want me to change the name after the class, I'll do it for you. And the reason being is it's not MDFI looking at you, Alex, saying, you suck, it's not the gun. It's me, the owner of MDFI, that owns a firearms training company that right out my back door here, I have a range that I built on the side of my hill when we first bought this property, and it's got weeds on it. I'm not out there as much as I should as the owner of a firearms training company. And it's my reflection in the mirror every day going grocery shopping saying, hey, dude, you suck more than you think you do because you don't live on the shooting range, and it's a perishable skill. So be as good as you can. And we're trying to fight the baloney excuse of combat accuracy, and that's the people. And it, you go shoot a bullseye target. You don't hit where you want to. You hold the target up to your chest and you go, I would take those hits in a gunfight. Well, that's not combat accuracy. That's your best day accuracy. No one's trying to kill you. You have to be able to thread the needle, little tiny groups. And you hear people go, well, bullseye target's not going to try to kill me, so I'm not going to shoot it. Well, that just means you can't shoot accurately. You got to do gas and brakes. I shoot our Frank target, which is our non-binary, gender fluid, generic cardboard bad guy, right? That no discerning features about him. I'll go out there and shoot the bad guy, but then I'll also put up a 1-inch dot, and I'll shoot for that 1-inch dot a lot, working on my marksmanship, and I do gas and brakes. So yeah, that class is the biggest eye opener for most people, and a lot of people, being our core class, they don't have to take it to take foundation handgun, and then generally what they do is they go back and take You Suck It's Not the Gun, because the graduates of You Suck It's Not the Gun are out shooting them 10-1, because instead of shooting a 1-inch circle, you're shooting at a 6-inch circle for the high thoracic cavity, or a 4-inch rectangle for the brain box, and you have to tape every miss. You have to tape every single miss in foundation handgun, and if you can shoot fast and accurate, you don't do a lot of taping. And so that's kind of the benefit to that class is very low round count, incredible amount of feedback, and a lot of value for each round fired.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And, I hate the excuse, oh, this gun just isn't accurate, or this gun, well, I don't know what's wrong with this gun. It's like, well, one, if it's got a red dot or irons that have, adjustable sights, did you zero the gun properly? That's your fault. It's not the gun's fault. It's your fault if you didn't make sure your equipment's proper. But that's why the name's so good. It's like it can be taken so many ways. But I guess to dabble into my next question is, so you said about 350 to 400 people a year take You Suck It's Not the Gun. Now, how many of those students come back and take, like, say they go to foundation handgun? Or
Great question. So I'll give you the best answer I can. There's a big difference between core and foundation, and then, quote, advanced and specialty. Mm-hmm. So the majority of people that will come to MDFI will never go past the foundation level. The majority, tens of thousands of people that have taken classes with me will never go past the foundation. And the reason being is there's a huge difference between the two. So in our core tier, we have carbine basics, 80 rounds with an AR-15 for 8 hours. You Suck It's Not the Gun handgun, 100 rounds, 8 hours. Those are very basic marksmanship-based classes that get into the very nitty-gritty about the fundamentals of marksmanship. Then our foundation, handgun, shotgun, rifle, 3 different classes. Those classes all have a motto. The motto of the class is, I will not accept an unloaded gun. Meaning, we are teaching you how to be one with the gun, marksmanship, of course, and then manipulation. Making sure you are a master manipulator of that platform, regardless of what the platform is, so you can fix it in the dark, whatever it is. Well, we hear the term advanced firearms training classes, and the true reality is there's no such thing. But I put it up there on the website, advanced and specialty, because one, it gives people a moment of pause when they see that word, if they're not an advanced shooter in their mind. The real reason I have it up there is I don't want to die on the range. If you just took a CPL class and you think you're going to run around other people with a gun, not a chance in hell in my classes, because you don't have the foundation skills to do it. So what it means is that you're now dealing with an environment and you happen to have a gun with you versus foundation. It's you and the gun. That's the big difference. So low light, you're dealing with the hours of darkness and you have a gun with you. So handheld light techniques, weapon light techniques. I'm going to teach you all the different handheld light techniques. I'm going to teach you some case law. I'm going to talk about, is it a good idea to do trigger finger activation of a weapon light according to Supreme Court case law. We're going to talk about how to properly scan with a weapon mounted light, if that's all you've got, because there's ways to do it right, ways to do it wrong, unlike the Detroit Police Department that were checking IDs on traffic stops with weapon mounted lights. I mean, there's things like that. Cover and movement. you're going to be doing the 5Ds. Oh yeah, that's a true story, by the way.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Cover and movement.
No. So cover and movement, if you're doing the 5Ds, the dodgeball, dive, duck, dive, dodge, duck, whatever they are, you'll be moving vertical position, standing, squatting, kneeling, prone, right side, left side, supine. You're going to be doing dynamic movement around other people. We're going to be working cover, the rules to cover. Well, if you're in total darkness and your gun goes click or you have a mush and you don't know what to do, well, if you didn't learn that foundation, it's going to be catastrophic in the dark. If you are laying underneath a car right side prone and you don't know how to do proper muzzle orientation, because now if I go to traditional workspace laying on that position, I'm going to muzzle the entire right side of the line. I need to have it locked in that it's orient muzzle in safest direction based on situation environment. So I might simply roll the gun on its side in the right position, or I might look up, roll onto my back with the muzzle going straight into the sky, access my support magazine, and roll back into position. So that's all those classes are about. Is I'm taking someone that's one with the gun, and now I'm teaching them real life things. Like you're now dealing with a parking lot, you're dealing with nighttime, you've got other people out there, so you can't muzzle them. And of course, then you get into our structure work beyond a door, which is okay. Now it's you and a partner, and we've got shoot houses up here, and it's statistical likelihood of survivability if you've got to go through a door. And of course, why are you going through a door? Because reasons. It's not tactical. We're not like room clearing because we just want to go get bad guys. It's my kid is on the other side of the house and they couldn't get to me in time before mom and dad blew the whistle, which tells the kids run to mom and dad's room so we can barricade and wait for police. I have to get out of the mall when there's an active shooter. And so the stuff that we teach is you can do it with a gun, you could do it with your hand on your grip in your holster, you could do it with no gun. And then, of course, our last one is the human element, which is all force on force. It's the capstone program. It's no more targets. I've got a whole cadre of role players. I put you in very realistic situations, and we test your operating system. How do you know constitutional use of force? How do you deal with medical situations? How do you deal with other people? How do you deal with bad guys? Everything. That class truly is the litmus test. And what you really find out is that, yeah, the gun classes are cool. I've got some pretty silly guns. I've got some really cool guns. What you find out is if your brain doesn't work, your $5,000 blaster is worthless. Mm-hmm. If you are the fastest thinking person in the world with an LCP, you're going to win the fight all day long. And that's what a lot of people don't want to go to. So to answer your question in a very long way, the reason why we see the majority of people that stop at core and foundation is the next level really tests you. And you have to be very, very locked in. And I think it's like we only have our when things go bad class, which is injured shooter and close contact shooting, as in someone just knocked you to the ground and you start the fight laying on your back with a holstered handgun. Like you're getting into stuff that kind of is daunting for people. And so we only offer one of those classes a year, and it will fill right up until the very last minute. We'll get enough people to eke it in. But yeah, the foundation classes, they fill like wildfire. The You Suck It's Not the Gun classes fill like wildfire. But yeah, to get people to go to a force on force 2-day where in order to learn, you have to fail over and over again. It takes a true ego check to do that stuff. And I've gone through, I don't know how many hundreds of hours of law enforcement, force on force and use of force training. And it's very humbling when you realize you missed something very, very critical. But the beautiful thing is, you don't miss it again because you learn from those demoralizing failures.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's nice to see, that you do have students who come back and they do take at least one other class. There all are also, if I'm not mistaken, you can come back and eventually try to get like this. Every class, you can tell me I'm wrong. At least I remember it used to give out these like metal cards essentially.
Yeah, the alumni cards.
The alumni cards. And then it takes a very long time. Is it a red card or a black card?
Black card.
The black card when you get them all done.
Yep, it is an engraved. If you take the entire curriculum, and there's no particular order. Some people of the last class is pretty funny. They've gone back they have taken You Suck It's Not the Gun as their final. They've gone through Human Element, Beyond a Door, and it's so funny. They take You Suck It's Not the Gun as their last class, and you get a serial numbered black card that has the MDFI logo on the back. It attests the date that you completed the entirety of the curriculum. As to date, we are just over 100. That is a hell of a task. Skylar, I do not remember what his number is, but he just got that awarded to him in recent history. And it is one of the coolest moments because the look in the eyes of the students is, we'll see them again. A lot of them come back and take, and you get some benefits when you're a black card holder, lifetime benefits. But we know we're going to see them. They'll come back and knock the rust off. But what I love is I see the look in their eye, and they're like, Trek, thank you to the cadre. I've got the skills I need. Now I'm ready to step into those very specialized classes, whether that's 4-person room clearing, vehicle close quarter battle, whatever a really quote unquote advanced class, they're squared away on all the stuff they need. And that's why I don't joke when I say it. I'm happy if someone were to call me a JV school. I'm getting people ready for the varsity team. And I take that very, very proudly because we are a manipulation-based school. And that's great. If I can get people to be confident and competent and understand how to manipulate their firearms responsibly and efficiently, I have done my job, and I go to sleep quite soundly with a smile on my face, knowing that we've done it. And I don't have to worry about being Insta-famous or, we got crazy shooting competitions where you're trying to take home coins. There's a time and a place for that, but that's not what we're training people for.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I like how you put that. You're wanting to train those students to be the best of their abilities so they can feel adequate and go to these other classes too, which is awesome.
Yes.
And it's cool that you said just over 100 people they've gotten the black card, which is pretty elusive. Because that's a lot of dedication. Even if you think about, that's a lot of time away from family, loved ones, other events. I mean, but there's a decent amount of opportunities to collect some of these classes from you, but you really got to be dedicated and there's not that, like you said, not that many who have that black card.
No, absolutely. And I'm just looking at it here for you. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 classes required. That's, and then there are some specialty classes that are not included in that, like our Dot Life class, which is all about maximizing your potential. Class, I take credit only for the logo, which is John Cusack holding up the RMR above his head. If you go to the website, but Tim Nelson and Brandon Miedema, they created that curriculum, and I highly recommend, if you are even a veteran red dot shooter and you want to see what performance enhancement can be like running a red dot, take that class. But that's considered a specialty class that's not required for the black card.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, that's cool. Now do you know of anyone who's actively pursuing this right now?
We have hundreds of them. We have hundreds of them that are, and it's so funny if you go to our Discord group of the alumni, people are like, "Oh, I'm missing X and Y, and I've got it scheduled to take this." And yeah, it's pretty neat to see the discussion when people are kind of sharing their path and progression. And we've had a student receive their black card wearing a full-on professional grade Boba Fett outfit. We had one guy show up, took a class with a Stars and Stripe onesie because he knew he was going to get his picture taken at the end. It's really neat. And by the time people have had their black card, they are truly family. And it's really an awesome thing. It truly is one of the coolest things, especially being 15 years with the company, to see that.
Mm-hmm. That is pretty astounding. And it's so cool to, people are that dedicated to getting instruction to be better self-defenders, better armed civilians, that they want to go take all those classes.
Sure.
I do want to switch gears a little bit before I start wrapping this up. We got to talk about the Brian Terry Foundation, right?
Absolutely.
Like if I talked to you today and I didn't bring this up, I would be hurting myself in the future because.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
It's like, it's one of these cool things I've seen, back when I first got into being a better self-defender or thinking about that. God, I'm going on 7 years now of, diving into the firearms industry and stuff myself. But, first hearing about you through Practically Tactical and other sources on the internet, I know a little bit about it. But for the people who don't know anything about the Brian Terry Foundation, can you give us the brief 3-minute version of why it started and whatnot?
Yeah, very sad reason, which is, not to get political, certainly, but we all know what's going on down at the southern border right now. So the Brian Terry Foundation is a not-for-profit that is named after U.S. Border Patrol agent Brian Terry. He was a small-town cop. He was a U.S. Marine. He was a Border Patrol agent who turned into a BORTAC operator, and that is the U.S. Border Patrol Special Operations Division down on our southern border. And in December of 2015, he was on a mission outside of, 2015. on the desert outside of Rio Rico, Arizona. Him and his team were trying to intercept a cartel rip crew, which are cartel crews that come across the United States, and they robbed the other cartel smugglers. And they encountered this cartel rip crew, and a firefight ensued, and Brian suffered a mortal wound. And of course, this was a terrible loss. He was an incredible person. And what made it worse was not only just losing a member of our U.S. Border Patrol to criminal activity on our southern border, but it turns out that a couple of the weapons that were used in the murder were for part of the famed Operation Fast and Furious, where our government was allowing weapons from U.S. gun dealers lawfully purchased to then be, and that's kind of a hot topic, straw purchase to then be funneled into Mexico, not only under their guise, as they said, to trace them, to follow criminal activity, but it kind of came out through some whistleblowers that was kind of to demonize the rights protected under the Second Amendment. So long story short, Brian's family started the Brian Terry Foundation. I am a trustee on the board of directors. I got involved after a scammer went after them many years ago during SHOT Show. As a private investigator, I helped them recoup some of the financial losses. And then as a way to try to help them out after suffering that loss, I got a little crazy and I decided to ride a bicycle from Flat Rock, Michigan, his birthplace, to the Brian Terry Border Patrol Station in Rio Rico, Arizona, which is 2,050 miles from Flat Rock. So for 25 glorious days, my rear end sat on a bike seat, solo unsupported, and we raised about $30,000 during that bike ride. After raising that money, I started what was called the Danger Zone auctions at SHOT Show. And to date, we've raised $250,000 for the foundation, which is 100% volunteer. There's no paychecks. And the missions of the Brian Terry Foundation, of course, is for justice, to get justice for Brian's murder. To date, all cartel members of that RIP crew have been prosecuted and convicted in American federal courts. No member of our U.S. government has been criminally found guilty to date. That's still a battle that needs to be won. They take care of the families of fallen Border Patrol officers, which unfortunately happens too often. And of course, for scholarships for young people that are going into a career in law enforcement. So you can find us at honorbrianterry.com. Every dime, other than, of course, the money that gets taken from the credit card processor, goes to the missions. And I'll tell you right now, with the economy the way that it is, we need help. The problem is it has been over 10 years now. I was just at SHOT Show, impromptu, just pitching an idea that Shield Arms is now making my revolver red dot optic conversion, which I'm very excited about. But I was also there as a member of the Brian Terry Foundation, and we were trying to garner funds. So if anybody's interested, go to the website, check it out. If you're interested, any $1, any $5, any $10 helps, and it goes to great missions. The mission of the Brian Terry Foundation shouldn't exist, but unfortunately it does. And so for as long as possible, I will be one of their greatest volunteers and supporters.
Mm-hmm. A very sad reason, but a very good cause.
Absolutely.
And a very good foundation. So I do recommend you all look it up if you can. Go give some money. It's a good cause. That's definitely for sure. I mean, that's the sad thing too, right? You know, we have to. We have bad things that happen in our lives that, you know, need to be righted, and usually it's a long process and a long endeavor until it becomes any better. But had something down my throat, but it's okay. It's good to see, and it's good to see people like yourself, you know, out there raising money. I know if I tried to do that bike ride, I would never get off that bike because the seat would be engulfed in my, and whatnot. But Lord,
I still see bike seats, and I cry a little bit when I see a bike seat.
Where is this bike? Is it hanging in your house? Is it mounted somewhere, or is it long gone? So
it actually was in the U.S. Border Patrol Museum in El Paso for many years. I just got it back about 2 years ago, and it is currently on display in the classroom back at Northern Woods Training Facility, covered in the stickers with the. It's a pretty neat memory. I will never do anything. I think I watched The Secret Life of Walter Mitty right before deciding to do a bike ride, so I had a little bit of craziness. Mm-hmm. My fiance at the time, now wife, I looked at her out of watching this movie and said, I'm going to do something crazy and ride a bike across the country for charity. And she said, no, you're not. And next thing you know, that's what I was doing. So yeah, you know, I tell people I fell into this because of the trying to help out the foundation, and then falling in love with the family, with Brian's family and the mission. And of course, coming from a law enforcement military background, but we all have to adult. So what I tell people is, if you don't have the time, and I get it, it takes a lot out of you, whether it's the Brian Terry Foundation, Gun Owners of America, the Firearms Policy Coalition, those folks battle on our behalf every day. So for the cost of a box of ammo for a month's worth of Starbucks, give them that money and then pay attention to them on social media, and they will show you how they are kicking tail for those that are trying to take our rights away. And so I think that's very, very important. It's very easy in today's world to just go, someone else will do it. Well, that's true, but support those people that are doing it if you can't do it yourself.
100%. I would 100% agree with that, right? We can't wait for the next guy to do it. We got to stand up. And if it's, not to get too political here, but if it's go and defend your rights at the Capitol, no one's going to do it for you, but you got to stick your voice out there. Just like whenever we talk about anything we don't like, you got to share your opinion. Not ever, the quiet majority doesn't always win, right? So it's usually the loud minority who, for some reason, always gets their way. But you got to stand up for yourself and make your opinion and voice heard. But Trek, I mean, we've had an awesome conversation here today. Is there any last parting words you'd like to share with the listeners before we wrap this up?
Yeah. So the thing that I tell, knowing full well that especially at a foundation level class, I may not ever see a student again. And I always tell them, I hope I do. But everyone out there that's listening, whether you're a competition shooter, a defensive minded student, you are tomorrow's instructors. My time with MDFI will end. My cadre will retire eventually. And we all right now know that there are friends of ours that when you say, hey, I'm going to shoot a competition, I'm going to take this class, do you want to come with me? And they're like, hey, bro, I would love to, but food on the table, clothes on my kid's back, gas in the tank, I can't afford it right now. Well, the next time you go to the range, when they do have time, when they didn't have to travel to Indianapolis for the shooting competition with the class, the safety briefing that you do at the beginning of the class, you are the instructor. The medical briefing that you do to make sure that you and your friends leave there as safe and sound as possible. And then what you teach those that don't have the knowledge of yours. You are tomorrow's educators. So stay hungry, know your audience, and work to build more competent and confident shooters, because I think everyone will agree we are a minority as far as responsibly armed versus gun owners. And the only way, because I never want, and I'm going to get just a tad political, I never want the government to give me the regulation of what training I need to have. The fact that a CPL, the government tells me I'm good, should terrify everybody, that the government says I'm good to carry a gun. So what we need to do as a community is say, you're not good, but we're just telling you, you need to go out and train, and I'm willing to train you. I'm willing to be your teacher if you will be that sponge and listen. And if we can do that through education, we will then make that majority a minority and then extinct. And one day, MDFI and all other firearms educators will no longer be necessary because everybody is trained. But I think everyone agree we got a lot of work to do. So stay hungry, keep training. If you're a competition shooter, I love you. I'm not one of those instructors. I hope I get a chance to share the competition world with you again. I haven't shot one in quite a while, but yeah, stay hungry regardless of what shooting sport you're in. And I look forward to the very next time I get to talk to you all again. So thank you so much for having me.
No problem, Trek, and thank you for coming on, brother. I mean, like I said, we've had a good conversation, talk about a lot of different topics, different things that I don't normally talk about on the show, which I still do, and I enjoy talking about, right? It's a little out of my element, but I still enjoy it because, that's where I started from, right? That defensively minded person who wanted to get better at shooting, so I went into competition, and then I've never left because I'm addicted. I'm addicted to it, but there's worse things to be addicted to. So I'll just take competition shooting and firearms ownership as my addiction. But so guys, if you're out there, go to trainmdfi.com, go to honorbrianterry.com, go check out all these things. There's going to be links in the show notes, everything to make sure you get all the information you need. Trek, if people want to reach out to you and talk to you more about certain topics, what's the best way for them to do?
100%. Officially, Trek at trainmdfi.com. That's my official email. If you're on the Instagrams, I am Trexico Trek, all one word. And we have, of course, MDFI training on the social media, both on Twitter and, of course, MDFI. And then we have Northernwoods Training Facility on Instagram. So, yeah, but if you want, I get a lot of emails every day. I always get back to everybody. And if I don't have the answer that you need, I know a Rolodex of people, and I will get you pointed in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Well, Trek, and people, if you hit him up, email him. If you don't, shame on you. But anyway, Trek, thank you, brother, for coming on. I've had a blast. Thanks for sitting with me for over an hour and a half, hanging out and having a good conversation. So I appreciate you and your time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I'm sorry for breaking your show 3 times throughout the recording.
I've had more technical difficulties, so don't feel bad. But to the listeners, get out and do the things. I'm going to see you on the next one.